Hello, everybody, and welcome to Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk. I am your host, Alex Brasky, alongside my co-host, Ajay Cybulski, here for the Batavia Daily News and Livingston County News. Each week, we'll discuss Buffalo's favorite football team, along with all of the comings and goings from Orchard Park. What's up, AJ? Tell the people what we have in store for them today.
Yeah, I am excited for this episode of Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk. Obviously, two great guests joining us today, Joe Marino from Lockdown Bills and Greg Tompsett, who will be our first guest this evening from Cover One. So a lot to talk about. Obviously, we will dive in depth on the 2024 NFL Draft and the Bills selections. There's still a lot to talk about. I know we, again, had a show earlier this week, but with Greg and Joe here, obviously we'll take that to another step. And feel free to comment, be interactive, and we'll try and discuss your questions or comments and as you guys follow along here tonight.
Yeah, this will kind of wrap up our commentary on the NFL draft, at least prior to rookie minicamp, which has now been scheduled. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's broadcast, let's discuss the most recent news out of One Bills Drive, reported by one of our guests last week, Tim Graham of The Athletic, who was reporting that Terry Pegula has transferred a small percentage, perhaps less than 1% of the Bills, to his daughter, Laura Pegula, due to his wife, Kim Pegula, being ruled incapacitated. Terry Pegula has been named the plenary guardian of the person and property of his wife after Kim Pegula suffered a debilitating heart attack nearly 2 years ago. Kim was previously listed as co-owner of the Bills and Sabres alongside her husband. The Pegulas used to own the two teams 50-50, but that is no longer the case. A longtime Pegula family associate briefed Tim on her condition and prognosis, saying Kim is not coming back to the Bills or Sabres front office. The Bills declined comment through a spokesperson. Laura, 41 years old, has been involved with what the Pegula family refers to as the home office, but has recently sat in on executive Q&A sessions with rank-and-file Bills and Sabres employees. Laura was the only Pegula child at the Lindy Ruff introductory press conference a few weeks ago, and per Tim's article, each May, teams are required to file an updated succession plan that must be approved according to established league guidelines. To be compliant, teams are required to designate a successor with a controlling interest, an effort to make any transition smoother and curtail potential family infighting. All right, AJ, a lot to unpack here when it comes to the transferring of ownership, but we're going to leave that for another day. Already kind of had our plans for this podcast set in stone. And like I said, we still want to give our reflections of the NFL draft and bring in two of our good guests as we bring to you, hopefully each week moving forward here on RHRN, Greg Tompsett of Cover One and Joe Marino of Locked On Bills. So let's move on to a little bit more lighthearted discussion. Bills rookie minicamp officially set for May 10th and 11th, next Friday and Saturday. Also, OTAs will resume May 20th through 21st and continue on May 23rd, and then May 28th through the 30th, June 3rd and 4th, and June 6th. Mandatory minicamp slated for June 11th through 13th. So a lot out of my mouth. Let's get back to you. What are you looking forward to the most out of the first-year guys, their first time on the scene together in Orchard Park during rookie minicamp coming up?
Yeah, just building chemistry, and I think having the wherewithal to have the belief this team can still go places. I think that starts at OTAs, during rookie minicamp, during stuff like that, where you can really come together as a team and get to know each other a bit more. The one thing I'm really looking forward to is there's not going to be the distractions this year, hopefully, about like a certain player like we had with Diggs last year, with mandatory minicamp and him not showing up and that being the drama. So I just hope it's a Bills-oriented time period where we just focus on, the future of the team, a new era with Josh Allen, a young and up-and-coming team, and I'm excited to see, again, what these rookies can do. I think it all starts, at OTAs during mini camps where you really get to know each other and you can really build that camaraderie to become a successful NFL team. So, yeah, it's coming up.
Yeah, I think what I'm looking forward to most out of rookie minicamp, seeing obviously Keon Coleman out there, but seeing some of those other guys that are going to go out there and try to compete for immediate contributing roles on this team. You look at a Cole Bishop at safety. You look at a Dwayne Carter at defensive line. I want to see how those guys fit in, not only alongside one another during rookie minicamp, but once OTAs open back up May 20th through 21st, also when they get out there alongside of their new Bills teammates and really how they match up against some of these guys, how they look in uniform, also that can tell you a lot sometimes. So just looking forward to seeing these guys spread their wings and put on that Bills red, white, and blue and really give their first action out there on the field. But aside from minicamp, AJ, we go back to the draft, and we'll bring in Greg soon here, our first guest tonight. We talked about a lot of the guys in the first 5 rounds, but we have failed to really dive into the 6th round, 7th round guys a lot. I know we mentioned Travis Clayton and how he tested off the board at the combine and how he's one of our favorite players moving forward. But do you think there's any of these 6th, 7th round guys that might be able to poke their head in there and compete for, like I said, a contributing role on this team? We mentioned all the way through Cedric Van Pran Granger with our guest Joe Marino, who will be coming up later, pre-recorded interview. But how about some of these later guys? Who do you see maybe sticking their nose in there? A Daquan Hardy, the like from the 6th, 7th round.
Yeah, I would go with the name you just mentioned, Hardy. And also, I think Ulofoshio. Am I saying that right? Ulofoshio from Washington. He's another one. Brandon Beane said during the fan event last week that there's uncertainty there if he'll be ready for day 1 of training camp. I assume he'll be ready for the regular season. That's all assumption. But I think with the whole offseason still, like we just mentioned, we were talking about OTAs, mandatory minicamp, rookie minicamp, all that stuff. I know Milano won't be at rookie minicamp, but I'm sure he'll be in the building at some point. There are a lot of things that Milano can do to get ready, but the Washington linebacker, Ulofoshio. This is gonna be awesome, Alex, when he makes the team and he's like,
you might just like to call him Eddie U from now on.
Yeah, Eddie U. So he's another name. Like again, those 2 guys, Hardy and Eddie U. I think those 2 guys can really make an effort to make this roster. I think Hardy, yes, he has the punt return ability, but I also think he can be. Saran Neal's no longer with the team, so maybe there's an avenue for Hardy to be that backup nickel. I know Cam Lewis is a name mentioned a lot for his position versatility, but I think Hardy could slot in maybe as depth behind Teron Johnson and obviously fight for that punt returning duty. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out at training camp, and I know Bills fans will be really intrigued. They love who got the first rep on the first punt of day 1 of training camp. Like that'll be a conversation, and I'm sure Hardy will, if given the opportunity, be able to get that first rep.
And one last thing before we bring Greg in. This is from our local area at the Batavia Daily News and Livingston County News. Caledonia native Alex McNulty invited to Bills and Packers rookie minicamp. And also, if you're a fan of University of Buffalo football, a legendary kicker out there is McNulty, and he's now getting his opportunity to kind of spread his wings perhaps at the professional level. A graduate of McQuaid High School in Rochester. He's a soccer player before pursuing his dream of becoming an NFL kicker. And during his 2022 season, set the single season school record for field goals at UB with 24. So this is a guy with plenty of leg. I know you have Tyler Bass and you have him signed, but maybe some sour taste left in Bills fans' mouths from his miss against the Chiefs. Maybe Alex McNulty latches on with perhaps the Bills or Packers. Certainly an exciting moment for him nonetheless, and somebody you wrote about. Just your reflection on that news.
Yeah, again, the most decorated kicker in UB history, first and foremost, set the all-time points record. I don't know the exact number. I don't have the article in front of me, but a lot of records he set throughout his time. Perfect on extra points last season. One thing I did realize was he has a booming leg. So he's hit from 50 plus a few times. The problem with him is his short yardage field goals. They're a little bit inconsistent. So if he can fix those issues, I could see him. I mean, even in the CFL, I could see him being a NFL kicker just because, he can hit from 55 plus, and that's what you need nowadays. You need a guy that can come in and hit from deep. But again, he needs to fix the accuracy from short, but obviously an awesome story, obviously close to what we cover, Alex, here at, Caledonia is a place we are very familiar with covering here at the Batavia Daily News. So yeah, good story. And I hope it works out for him. He definitely deserves it. And a very, very good story. Very inspirational.
Yeah, I guess that can bring us to kind of an offhand topic, just your confidence in Tyler Bass. entering this season. You saw him miss that key kick against the Chiefs. He was a little bit inconsistent down the stretch after starting the season red hot. Just your confidence level in Tyler Bass, I think I view it as he kind of has to prove it in those clutch situations. I know that he's made a couple of game-winning kicks before, but you have this big kick against the Chiefs and you fail to come through, and that was really a game changer against them. Just your confidence level in him going into the season.
Yeah, so I was actually at UB for Matt Perino's journalism class when the news went down about them extending Tyler Bass. And I had chatted with Matt, and I was like, yeah, I think we both thought it was a good move for the Bills. We thought it was something that we were fond of. But, I mean, last year, 82.8% field goal percentage, 28th in the NFL, made 98% of extra points, so he just missed a couple. But last season, he was 4 of 6 from 50+, 4 of 6 from 40 to 49. So most of his misses came beyond the 40-yard marker. He was 8 of 12 40-plus yards last season. So am I concerned with Bass? No, because I think he can figure it out, and I think this is a huge offseason for him, coming off that big year in 2022 and then following it up last year with kind of a I wouldn't say like under like performing season, but I would more say more inconsistent and a little bit more rocky with Tyler Bass last year. But again, he has the lag, like we just mentioned about McNulty. He has the lag. It's just about shoring up the accuracy issues, especially from 40+, because that seems to be a little bit of the issue going on right now for Bass.
Now, shifting gears to a topic that we'll bring up with Greg in a few moments, just your impressions of how the Bills might look this season offensively. Kind of a new look for them without Stephon Diggs, and you let go of Mitch Morse up front, a bit of shuffling up there as well. And you're bringing a Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid in his second year. You bring in Ray Davis as a potential complement to James Cook in the backfield. Are we expecting this offense to look a lot different than it has the past couple of years? I think from my perspective, I see just Dalton Kincaid may be more heavily utilized within this offense, maybe two tight end sets as we saw developing last year with he and Dawson Knox. You also have James Cook coming out of the backfield. And really, I think it's all going to come down to Keon Coleman and whether or not he can really put his stamp on this offense early.
Yeah, I think Ray Davis, James Cook, Ty Johnson, they're all going to be using the passing game, running game. It's going to be – I think James Cook will get majority of the snaps. I think he'll get a lot of carries. But, yeah, it's going to be a more run-oriented offense this year, I would say, with more of a sprinkle, more like a whack-a-mole, like who's open, let's get him the ball, get him in space, get yards after the catch. So, yeah, Alex, right on with that. I think Dalton Kincaid, based on – he's the happiest man in Buffalo right now in terms of his volume and production, just because I think – he was drafted. They traded up for him last year. Josh Allen obviously wanted him, and I think his awareness over the middle of the field and his ability to get upfield is something the Bills don't really have, and I think that'll show as the year continues in the sophomore season.
All right, and I think I kind of surprised him bringing him in there unannounced. Greg Tompsett, how are you, bud? It's good to see you. Where in the world is Greg Tompsett right here, right now on the pod? Obviously, co-host of Cover One Buffalo Pod and the Greg Tompsett Sports Show, expert capologist, and all-around family man. What's up, Greg?
Finally back home with the family. Too much travel lately, but happy to be back home and here for a little while. I don't have another trip planned for a little bit. I'm actually home for multiple consecutive weeks, maybe for the first time this year. It's been a wild travel schedule, but ready to be back home.
It's good to see you. And obviously, me and AJ grateful for you to be with us here on Right Here, Right Now. And one of the topics that we touched on before you came on, kind of how the Bills offense is going to look without Stephon Diggs. Will we see a boatload of two tight end sets? Will we see more of a ground and pound style? How will they utilize Curtis Samuel? I know I threw a lot at you there, but before we get to some draft discussion, just your overarching thoughts on how the Bills offense may look come this season.
So I do think, obviously, there's some things we can take from the 11 weeks of Joe Brady offense. You see, we were over 50% run rate. We saw more distribution, less heavy focus on one primary target. I will say there are factors that go into that. There was always kind of the underlying element of, hey, it wasn't formally designated, but it certainly seemed like Stephon Diggs had a bit of a core muscle issue going on. the weather comes into play at the end of the season. That's always going to impact run versus pass. Also, Joe Brady couldn't install his full offense in his full vision. So with those things aside, we still saw what he did. So I think the idea that a fair amount of balance and utilization of multiple running backs, I would say the 4th-round pick is an indicator that they had more usage for James Cook than I anticipated last year. Maybe that was even a little heavier than they wanted. We saw their attempts, probably some plans for Damian Harris that obviously with his very unfortunate neck injury and then now retirement, the age of Latavius Murray, even trying out Leonard Fournette, kind of a little found money in Ty Johnson. They want a little bit more there. The mix of what Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid can be, like, is that going to be a part of it? We've seen different usages for Curtis Samuel, his best career season under Joe Brady. So I'm not going to fully go that, hey, those 11 games, that is what his offense is going to be. That's exactly what we're going to see. But it would be naive to not apply some applications of that in what it's going to be. So I don't think it's all of a sudden going to go to 10 personnel, 5 wide, empty backfield, 90% pass rate. I think we're going to see some commitment to balance and then utilize that with some play action, maybe maybe even a screen game. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I don't want to get people too excited.
Oh, my goodness.
Maybe even a screen game.
Bills fans are busting hearing that.
But many of them are actually asking, I'm sorry, what's a screen? I'm not familiar with that.
Right.
So before we get to some more sure things, we're going to talk about the draft here real quick. Did you pick in the dynasty draft already?
So unfortunately, I don't have any picks in the draft. I actually do. I have the 9th pick in the 4th round. But the reason I don't have any picks is I went all in and traded all my picks to win. So I am the defending champion of the Bills Media Dynasty Fantasy League. So yes, if you're gonna go all in, you might as well win the trophy. And fortunately for me, I did win the trophy. But now I have to watch everybody else make all the rookie picks, and I gotta wait till the 4th round. And
at the same time, I'm sure all Bills fans would have taken the Super Bowl trophy one of these past 3-4 years and fallen off a cliff the year after, as long as they had that Lombardi in their grasp.
Trophies never die.
Very true. So, Greg, to the draft now. Obviously, a very, I would say, surprising in terms of just how it all went down towards the late 1st round, early 2nd. You saw Brian Thomas Jr. get to 22. Obviously, Bills fans were chiming for him when Rome Odunze got to 9. That also was talked about. That was kind of the sweet spot for the Bills. But obviously, that was not the case. They drafted Keon Coleman, who many did not even discuss. I mean, maybe brought up, but it was not heavily discussed like the Lad McConkeys, the Legates of the world that obviously went right around him. So are you okay seeing the Bills trade back from 28 to 33 and then watch Worthy go at 28, Leggett go at 32, who obviously they knew when they traded back with the Panthers they were going to probably either take Leggett or Coleman, and then McConkey at 34. And does your evaluation of Keon Coleman impact your opinion on that?
So let me try to go in order here. So the process was very sound. If you've identified your guy, you know that the people they're trading up for are not going to be your choice, because otherwise they would have just stayed and taken him. Then trading back in the 2 trades together basically netted out Dwayne Carter for free. Like the 2 combined, what they moved up, and then basically the 2nd trade down replaced what they tacked on along with the first one. So the 2 trades combined, if they just went straight from 28 to 33, they basically got pick 95 for free. So you got Dwayne Carter for free, who I actually was a big fan. Maybe is my favorite pick out of the whole draft. To get a guy that I'm going to assume you would have taken anyways at 28. Now, for me, he wasn't my choice, but I won't go as far as that I didn't like the player. He was on my list. He was probably 5th or 6th out of the guys that were there at the time. So, it's not like it was some enormous reach of, again, my uneducated rankings and listing. So the idea that you still got your guy at that spot and accrued value is good process. So that I will commend. Ultimately, this is a results-driven league. Like, it's not going to matter if Xavier Worthy looks awesome and you traded down and you had him rank lower, but he ends up good. No one's going to care. If he ends up being John Ross, and you ended up getting T. Higgins at pick 33, no one's going to care what you made the right pick. You did the right thing. So unfortunately, this is a results driven business, and it's going to go that route. So he was on the list of guys that are there. I'll just do a quick pub for our guys. Eric Turner did a fantastic video breakdown going into the pros and cons, because there are cons with having Keon Coleman there and what we're going to need to see. I will say there are more positive snippets and slivers in his Michigan State tape than there is in Florida State, which I think is promising, because that shows more capability and traits, and that, hey, maybe Jordan Travis's play and then the real big drop off after losing Jordan Travis probably impacted things more than what people realize. And he goes through some of that context, but he is not some amazing separator who in the past, Josh liked Cole Beasley cutting and being open by 3 yards. And, oh, I see you. Boom. Here's my rocket arm. You get the ball before anything can happen. Stephon Diggs creating separation. Khalil Shakir creating separation. Emmanuel Sanders creating separation. I can visually see it. And then my howitzer of a right shoulder gets the ball there before the defender can do anything. So that idea of what we've grown used to, Keon Coleman's not that. Like, even if he turns into that, T. Higgins isn't that. Like, let's say, I think that's like a ceiling comp. So if everything goes perfectly for Keon Coleman, he could be T. Higgins. The measurements, the size, they're both picked 33rd overall. The leaping ability, the kind of oddly slow 40 that doesn't translate to their game speed. There's a lot of comps there. So if everything goes well, you have T. Higgins doesn't do that either, but Joe Burrow has that timing with him of where to put the ball and to use that crazy jumping ability to get the ball. We haven't seen that from Josh. So I'm going to believe that Josh was excited about this pick and lobbying. I don't think that he was like, some people are like the draft day movie that Josh was like, Keon Coleman, no matter what. Pretty sure that wasn't it. But I will say
that's how Brandon Beane wants to make it seem. That's for sure.
But, hey, if I could use our franchise savior as a protective dome over my draft pick, I would too. So I don't fault him. I'm not gonna hate on him. But I will say I do believe that Coleman was probably on Josh's list, and that this is something that maybe he is looking to utilize a little bit more, but he's going to need to, because we haven't seen that in the past.
And I think you hit it right on the head. This is a results-based league, and I think it's ultimately going to come down to how Keon Coleman acclimates himself and the speed in which he does so this season. I think he needs to go out there. I think he needs to be a contributor right away, and he will ultimately define this year's draft class, I think, when it comes to the Bills. But beyond him, what's your overall evaluation of this year's class? You talk about a Dwayne Carter. We mentioned Cole Bishop with Joe Marino, a previously recorded interview yet to come on this podcast. Two players that are also going to be called upon to contribute pretty quickly within this defense in the secondary and up front. Do you think they have that capability? We'll start with Bishop, and then if you could work your way to Carter. Can Bishop challenge for a starting role going up against Taylor Rapp and Mike Edwards, kind of the two incumbent starters, if you will, for the Bills? And will Dwayne Carter be able to provide that push up front behind Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver?
So in general, this class, it's going to fit in pretty well to what my statements were. The Bills picked a lot of guys I was interested in. They picked them a little bit earlier than I thought. But again, I am a perfect example of the draft industrial complex and like how the mock draft simulators trick everyone into like, oh, I always got that guy later here. This simulator always has him ranked 140th. And I loved the one little snippet specifically on Cole Bishop was Brandon Beane mentioned about him of like, well, you guys are crazy. He's not going to be available there. And he even made fun of Josh of like, he would come up with these guys and he'd have like 4 picks that were all in their top 50. And he's like, Josh, those guys are not going to be there at those spots. So you could tell his anxiety of like needing to hold himself back from trading up a couple spots to make sure they got Cole. That shows you they had an early to mid second round grade on Cole Bishop. Well, when you look at, all the people who got up in arms about that, like, well, but I used PFF's mock draft simulator and they rank him 144th. Well, guess what? The guys who do this for a living don't and didn't and had him ranked higher. And I will say the consensus board, if you took the shout out to Arif Hassan, who does an awesome job compiling a crazy amount of all the different boards and everything like that to give a consensus, Bishop was much higher. I think he's coming in very similar to Taylor Rapp last year, much less established in front of him, but a nice movable piece. If we're going to go with 3 safeties, he can come in, he can play center field, he can play in the box early on. I think he's better in the box. I think he's better as a bigger overhang, that star position. We don't necessarily use Taron Johnson always in that style, but that kind of spot where at the high end of it, you have like when Derwin James is playing in a 3 safety set, he's not either the traditional free safety or strong safety. He plays in kind of a big nickel overhang. They call it the star in the dime system. It goes through. It'd be cool to have a big, crazy athletic guy. So the biggest thing for Cole Bishop is we've seen this front office and coaching staff carve out a crazy amount of talent and production from UDFA's low risk signings, moderate to mid athletes. If you look at some of the testing for guys like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, they were average at best compared to other elite, amazing pro athletes. Having a guy who is an off the charts crazy athlete is very intriguing. I'm curious to see what this coaching staff can do with a guy like that. I think it's more of a Matt Milano, Ramon Humber situation where maybe by the end of the season, we see him carving out a starting role. And you almost saw that with Mike Edwards in Kansas City last year.
Right.
So I would expect to see Edwards and Rapp starting week 1, but I think we see snaps from Bishop early on, big special teams player. And I won't be shocked if by midseason we see him taking over the starting role.
Yeah, Greg, that's kind of where I was at with the whole Cole Bishop signing. My favorite pick of the draft. I think that he alludes to that. He might not start more games than Edwards or Rapp, but I think he could possibly outsnap them when, we're looking at the end of the schedule at week 7 or week 18, and we look at the snap share between those 3 guys. I could see Bishop just because of his versatility, like you said, athleticism and all that stuff. But now with the draft over, obviously there's more questions answered. What's your biggest area of concern about this team? Is it the wide receiver room that you don't feel has a wide receiver 1 essentially? And if Keon Coleman struggles, what do you do? Where are you at with the biggest area of concern for the Buffalo Bills heading into 2024?
I would say I'm more comfortable with Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid as top target distribution. Like those 4 as the top. I agree. Obviously, I don't think we have a dominant number 1, but I think people overstate how big of an issue or problem it is. Because I actually think if you ranked the NFL's 4th best target, we're much, much higher on that list than a lot of teams would be. So yeah, it's more of a shared responsibility, but that doesn't mean bad. I think people have equated that to, we don't have a wide receiver 1. That means we have one of the worst receiving corps. And I actually don't think that's accurate. So in that sense, and I do expect there to be another addition. I don't think it's going to be super exciting, but I do expect one of these DJ Chark, Tyler Boyd, Odell Beckham Jr. I do expect one of these guys to catch on with the Bills here, simply because there is an opportunity to do so. Maybe the recently cut Zay Jones. So I would actually go. I like David Edwards a lot more as a 6th jumbo lineman than depending on him being the piece to protect Josh Allen as a starting lineman. And the fact that I don't even know who our backup is behind him. Is it would Van Pran go in and McGovern kick over, or is it Will Clapp? There's not somebody that I'm like last year when we had Ryan Bates and David Edwards as our 6th and 7th linemen. I felt really, really good about it. Maybe we get something more from Lyle Collins. I know Lyle Collins has been out there a bit. Maybe that's the answer.
And I think Will Clapp, Bean mentioned him as that potential piece. He said that they went out and satisfied that with a veteran. I think he was pointing to Will Clapp there. But I think in a perfect world, they'd like Cedric Van Pran Granger to come in and perhaps challenge for at greatest a starting role.
Yeah, I think he was one of the best values of what we had come in there. I know a lot of people, obviously, Aaron Cromer has forgotten more about offensive line play than I'm ever going to know. So if he says Connor McGovern can play center in the NFL, then I mean, Aaron Cromer, again, all right. He's never done it. He's literally never snapped a ball in an NFL game. So I won't be upset if Van Pran wins the job and McGovern just goes right back to left guard, because I saw him do that pretty well. I'm good with keeping the other 4 linemen the same and just replacing the one, rather than the projection of assuming that McGovern makes the transition and that Edwards is ready to go in. Like I would rather that route, but again, I trust, they've put together enough and made enough steps forward with what they have that I'm going to trust that they have that squared away. But that would be the biggest one for me. I know we asked earlier about Dwayne Carter. I actually think that's going to turn into a really nice addition. I think people get worried about, he's a backup. Well, even towards the end of the season, Ed Oliver was playing a lot of snaps, but it was like 75%. So if there's 25% of your snaps floating out there, that's 25 for him. He'll play as the backup 3-tech. Well, there's another like 20, 25, 30% with Daquan Jones when we need an obvious pass rush in third and 12, where you can have Ed Oliver and Dwayne Carter next to each other, both rushing the passer. I think he's going to play 55% of snaps this year. And I think he's going to do it really, really well and be a very pleasant surprise for this team. So we'll see where that goes. And my biggest surprise from the draft, I love Solomon. I'm really, really excited about him. I think I'm glad to see that they're leaning into that type of pass rush, and everything doesn't have to be the compress, squeeze the pocket power. He is a bendy guy around the edge. I'm excited to see him.
Yeah, I'm certainly excited to see Dwayne Carter in press conferences. He was a joy to talk to on draft day. I know that Keon Coleman got a lot of that attention nationwide, but Dwayne Carter was really a joy to talk to, really a deep thinker and someone who I think can provide plenty of leadership, something that the Bills lost a lot of in all those veteran losses this offseason. But Greg, we bring you in, we got to ask you about the salary cap. How do you feel with how the Bills come out of the draft salary cap wise? Do you think that we might see a big move come post June 1st? I know you just mentioned you think that the Bills are going to come away with one of these free agent wide receivers. So is that the position that you're targeting there post June 1st when that money comes off the cap due to the Trey White release?
So, I think people get excited. There was a lot of talk about whether it was T. Higgins or Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk or even Justin Jefferson. There are a lot of things that are theoretically possible. We're still pretty tight up against it. And anything that we would have to create a bunch of space, all we would do is kick a bunch more cans into next year and force ourselves to have another Black Wednesday and another mass rush of cuts. So right now we've done the hard part. We've taken our medicine. We've actually cleaned it up pretty cleanly. Like, we go into next year with cap space. Like, we haven't done that in a long time. We're going to have cap space plus another 40 or 50 million in moves we could make to create even more. Like, next year we could create a ton of cap space if we want to. So they've gotten back to where we're in pretty healthy shape. We get 10.3 million from Trey White on June 1st. I think we see a couple little moves. I don't think we see mass shakeups. I don't think we see a trade for a franchise tag or some huge acquisition like a T. Higgins or Deebo or Brandon Ayuk. If a Tyler Lockett or a Cortland Sutton type of move presents itself where the other team eats some money or they're cheap as where they go. But I think spending a little bit of money on some of the pockets here, if you look at some of the positions that are a little bit deeper in free agency, we did it last year going after Leonard Floyd. So I think that some of those kind of spots would make sense. I would say a wide receiver, and I don't know, AJ, what position do you think they'd go after here to be able to pick one more?
Yeah, so I want to say that I know they got Tua Hill, and I know that they re-signed Epinesa, and I know Rousseau, they're still hoping, they picked up his fifth-year option, they're still hoping that he can become the guy that they projected him to be when they took him in 2021. You obviously add Von Miller, but I do, like, Greg, am I crazy for, like if I kind of want, like, I know there might not be a Leonard Floyd guy out there. I haven't really, like, checked up on the edge market, but do you think, like, there's any room for, like, a edge trade and edge signing, just because I feel the need for edge right now. I just feel too uncertain with that room because I feel like they don't have a dynamic guy. I know Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones are solid, but Von Miller's only getting older, coming off an injury. Epinesa coming off a good season, albeit it's, that's for him in retrospect to like these elite pass rushers. So just where are you at with the edge room before we get going here? And do you think trading or signing one is a potential option?
So Tyus Bowser, Bud Dupree, Marcus Golden, Jerry Hughes, Yannick Ngakoue, Carl Lawson, Emmanuel Ogba. Those are all free agents still.
Okay.
So
we had a listener on Monday kind of already lay the groundwork for our Jerry Hughes reunion. Some Bills fans would love to see that.
I think it's more along those lines. I do not think they're going to go after some like earth-shaking pass rusher, especially not until Von Miller comes off the books. When Von Miller comes off the books, maybe that opens that up. I don't think they're going to overlap that. I think they again, we released like 7 really impactful players on this team. They're not going to do that and then immediately dig back in and create another hole right after they did that. They just did the hard part. So if you told me that like Emmanuel Ogba makes a lot of sense, like that's a guy who I think could come in, play legitimate snaps, is going to be impactful, doesn't have a ton of pressure on the Javon Solomon to produce right off the bat. We know that we like to have 9 defensive linemen. I think that's a guy who would immediately be an upgrade over a Kingsley Jonathan or a Shaq Lawson reunion, and probably has a little bit more juice left than Jerry Hughes. But even if it is a Jerry Hughes or a Yannick Ngakoue or someone like that, I think that there is a spot there. And those would be the 2 I would predict, is some veteran addition at wide receiver and some at pass rusher. But you got to remember, like last year, that was Tavon Austin and who was the pass rusher that came back for camp?
Excuse me, repeat that.
The pass rusher who came back for camp that everybody got excited about for a minute and was like a blast from the past.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
That's all it was. That's all it was the fun story in the moment.
Yeah, it was a fun story. He was a former like top recruit.
Yeah. Anyways, there's way more of those kind of a day. Anquan Bolden spending the day at camp. Tavon Austin coming back for a minute. I don't know that I'm expecting. I do not expect anyone of a Leonard Floyd caliber impact.
Right. And again, like you said, Greg, like with those names you mentioned, I don't really know if there's any edge rusher that could come in. I just, that's my biggest concern for this team is just the sack production and the pressure production and how they affect quarterbacks, just because
anyone that comes in would be edge 4.
Right. That exactly. So I just have some concern there, but before you get going, thank you for coming on. We greatly appreciate it. And plug what you got going. I know you probably I think you got a show right after this. It sucks that you can't draft until the 4th round tonight, but oh well, you won the chip and you got it done. So hey,
I have to just cuddle with my trophy. Yes, make sure come on, check out anything else that we have going on at Cover One. Go to YouTube, anywhere that you're checking this out. Search for Cover One. You'll find all of our work there. You can find me at Greg Tompsett on Twitter, and having a good time with Bills fans. And now getting through the tough part of the content calendar here as we go from the draft all the way to training camp. Just so excited for what you guys are getting started here and right here, right now. You guys know we're big fans of both of you over at Cover One. So excited to see where you guys take this and watch all the fun to come.
Appreciate you, Greg. Thanks for carving out some time and keep on keeping on.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
I think I cut off his Go Bills there, but good stuff from Greg. I thought we learned a lot. Creating some cap space for next year is something that Bills fans certainly have not grown accustomed to over the past several years. Usually it's Brandon Beane jumping through hoops in the offseason to try to get back to cap relevancy. But I think the Bills are looking for that soft reset here, particularly with the salary cap, while still trying to compete for that Super Bowl. And you heard Greg touch on it there.
Yeah, that really is what stuck with me from him, is the results-driven part of the conversation. And I think you'd also touched on it after he spoke on it. The draft content and all that stuff is really fun. We can all talk about it. It's obviously very important to know what the Bills are looking for, what NFL teams are looking for or looking to add. You obviously had an idea the Bills are going at wide receiver, but there's so much uncertainty from who the Bills are going to select, and then from now until August, it even adds to the uncertainty because we truly don't know what these players are going to be. All we're doing is projecting and believing. And that's the thing, Alex, and sorry to interrupt myself, but maybe put it back on you. Brandon Beane, like, don't you have to trust him at this point in a way, just because of his success as a general manager? Like, don't you feel like anything he does, you can logically like get to a point where you're like, oh, that makes sense?
Yeah, you'd think so with Bills fans over the years. With he and Sean McDermott have built up enough goodwill. But at the same time, with these Bills fans chomping at the bit for that Super Bowl, I think that's really what it all comes down to. And in a lot of Bills fans' minds, I think they're on the same wavelength as you. I think they recognize what Beane and McDermott have done for this organization. They recognize the steps that this organization has taken under their leadership, and they see that as a continuing process. But then you have another large faction of the fan base that simply is Super Bowl or bust, and nothing besides that is going to be good enough. So you've seen Brandon Beane have some iffy moments in the draft in the past. I think he's hit on some more prospects here in the past couple of years, but we'll see how it plays out this year. It is a results driven league, as we said, and I keep saying it. This year's draft is going to come down to Keon Coleman and how quickly he can step in and make an impact on this offense. I think that's how Bills fans are going to view it. They're going to view it through a Keon Coleman lens, and that's how they're going to judge this 2024 draft class.
Absolutely.
And let's get to our next guest. Without further ado, we welcome in Joe Marino, a pre-recorded interview with Joe this afternoon. So here we go. All right, here with Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills and co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, both available on YouTube and all audio platforms. Also the author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, and father of two. Joe, how's it going?
Alex, AJ, good to be on with you. Congratulations on the launch of the new podcast. A great branding, by the way. Excellent name. I love the logo. So well done, and I wish you guys a lot of success.
Shout out to our producer, Mark Tillery. He does a great job with all the display and audio stuff that we need. He's really our ace in the hole in that department.
Nicely done. I figured you didn't have the creativity to pull this off, so that makes a lot of sense. I was wondering how we got here.
Yeah, we're just a couple of sports guys trying to get through a podcast, but why don't we dive right into it? We're going to get into some Bills draft discussion as we've been doing this week here at the Batavia Daily News. But from a bird's eye view, how do you see this year's draft class shaping up? Do you feel the Bills drafted enough immediate contributors to fill the needs that they entered the draft?
I think that's what excites me about the draft is you can look at, I would say, 9 of the 10 picks and say, you know what? Yeah, I get it. I understand the role that this player can fill even in year one. And I think that's what I can appreciate about it. Would I probably have picked some different players along the way? For sure. And that's the world that I live in as a draft analyst, right? I've done my own draft rankings. And so what good is a draft board if you're not going to follow it? So yeah, I would absolutely have made a few different decisions along the way, but I can respect that Brandon Beane made logical choices at logical positions and that you can look at these players and say, you know what? Yeah, I can see exactly how they fit and what they should do in year 1, year 2, and into year 3.
So, Joe, like you said, you probably would have went a different direction. And I kind of just want to add to that. How shocked were you? Like, first of all, they trade back from 28 to 32. The Chiefs select Worthy. Then Leggett goes at 32, where the Bills again traded back one spot with the Panthers. Leggett goes at 32. And then McConkey goes right after Coleman at 34. So, like, based on where you were at pre-draft, like, is that something you even thought of, that Keon Coleman would go before McConkey, first off? And second off, do you think the Bills with Worthy, McConkey, and Leggett on the board would still pick Keon Coleman? Or were you kind of stunned that that's how that kind of end of this first round, early second round played out?
Well, one thing about the back 25% of the first round is it's always very unpredictable. And that's where, whenever I look at a mock draft, that's always where I go. I don't care about the first 25 picks. It's some version of the same 25 players, right? The back 25% is really where it gets interesting. And I think that played out in the real draft. I don't think I'm surprised at all of the maneuvering. I was hopeful that Brandon Beane would trade back. That was something I championed for months on the podcast. I didn't know if he would, because his tendencies certainly didn't tell you that he would. But now he's broken another Beane tendency. So he's telling you better keep your options open with me. I'm going to do a lot of different stuff. So him moving back, I hoped would happen. I'm not surprised by the order that they preferred the wide receivers. You know, I feel like in really looking at it, it made sense that they would want a size player, right? Like that was the piece that's missing, was a player that brought some physicality and some size. And for whatever you thought about Gabe Davis, he did provide that to this team. and they didn't replace that in any way, shape, or form. So I guess when you kind of think about it through that angle, you can understand why that would be what they need, a true X receiver. And Keon Coleman certainly fits the bill as it relates to that. And I certainly think that when they moved back from 32 to 33, they thought to themselves, we're probably okay with either Keon Coleman or Xavier Leggett. We'll let Carolina make that choice for us. We'll get the extra draft capital and also have that opportunity going into night 2 where everybody's wanting that top pick in the first round or the second round. And we saw a bunch of trades, right, into that range. And I think that gave them some leverage and some opportunity. And I think it played out pretty well. I mean, it's better than picking Keon Coleman at 28, right? You were able to gain some additional draft value and still get a receiver that obviously they liked.
Yeah, Brandon Beane finally, like you said, like when Ryan Thomas Jr. was there on the board at 22, I was like, if he really wants this guy, he will go get him because, like you said, Joe, his track record has that on his record of Kyrie Elam trading up for him, Dalton Kincaid trading up for him, obviously back in 18 with Edmonds and Allen. So he'll do what it takes to get his guy, but obviously he felt comfortable rounding out that wide receiver room with the first pick in the second round and Keon Coleman. So let's start there. Keon Coleman, Florida State product, obviously the 40 time. Me and Alex have talked about already a lot on our previous show this week. Just what does he bring to this Bills wide receiver room? What are your expectations in year one? I know that's hard to read right now because there's a lot of uncertainty across that wide receiver room. But just your thoughts on Keon Coleman, his size, what he'll bring to this wide receiver room, and the relationship he's going to build with Josh Allen.
Yeah, youth, size, and athleticism, I think, is what he brings to the table. I mean, only 20 years old. He'll turn 21 pretty soon, but he got drafted at 20 years old. And he brings that size dynamic that was really missing with the rest of the wide receiver core, at least in terms of the top targets. And also he gives you a lot of body control and ball skills and hands. I mean, he's a very sure-handed receiver. And so, where he doesn't really provide you much in the ways of separation ability based on what we've seen to this point, I think he checks all the rest of the boxes. And that's what gives me a level of optimism about what he can do for this team. So for me, the most important thing a wide receiver does is separate. Well, I'm a little concerned because I don't think Keon Coleman's a great separator. The good news is he does all the other stuff very, very well, and he's young. So I get intrigued there. I think you got to take the 40 time with proper context. It's not prohibitive to him being a good NFL player. He's very athletic. His play speed is outstanding, as identified through the GPS tracking that exists for all of the wide receivers, right? He's right there on par with any receiver in this class in terms of actual functional play speed. So some guys run 4.4, but then in pads, they run 4.65. I think Keon Coleman runs about a 4.6 in pads and on the field. And I think that's an okay place to be. In terms of like the expectations, I have high expectations. I know that he wasn't a first round pick, but let's be honest, he was picked 33. So like the Bills traded out of the first round, but not really. That's still right there in terms of being a pretty high selection. I think that Dalton Kincaid's still going to be the breadwinner in this offense. I think that Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir will challenge for 80, 90 targets apiece. But I think that in year one, it's not unreasonable for me to think that 70 targets or so could go to Keon Coleman. It's just about how Josh Allen develops that chemistry, rapport, and trust, right? That's what it comes down to. We've seen Josh Allen very quickly hit the ground running with certain targets that were onboarded, and for others, it took a little bit of time. And so how does that evolve? How quickly does it evolve? At some point, it's going to happen, right? I think you even saw that with Dalton Kincaid this past year where, you kind of force-fed him some targets early, let him catch the ball, turn and run, and then as the season moved along, you saw him get involved more and more down the field. I think we'll see something like that with Keon Coleman, and if it really takes off quickly, you could see him becoming, even maybe the second or third option in this passing game in year one. It's only a matter of time, though. They drafted this guy to be a high-volume piece of their offense. It's just a matter if it's now, middle of the season, or in 2025.
Yeah, you hear Brandon Beane talk about starting Coleman at the X and trying to get him going there. A little bit of discussion has surrounded that potential move. But you talk about the game speed, second overall at the combine on go routes last season with 21.7 miles per hour. And you talk about it not being prohibitive, his 4.6 40 time. Other receivers in the past who have run 4.6 or slower at the combine, we talked about it last week. Larry Fitzgerald, Jerry Rice, Cooper Kupp among them. So certainly not a prohibitive stat. I wouldn't look at it at all. And he has return ability, which is something the Bills may need going into this season. But moving on to the other second round pick. And Joe, listening to the Locked On Bills podcast, something I really stuck with me leading into this draft was you thought rounds 2 and 3 were the sweet spot of this draft. And with that trade back out of the first round, the Bills were able to secure that third round pick, get Dwayne Carter. But with that second round pick, Cole Bishop, how do you see him developing in his rookie season? Brandon Beane said it might take a little while for him to enter the starting lineup. Do you think he may be able to crack that by season's end? Do you think the Bills need him to do so with Taylor Rapp and Mike Edwards coming into that position? And where do you see him slotting in, strong or free safety?
Yeah, I can appreciate Brandon Beane seeing this draft similarly to me. I thought second and third round was a sweet spot. He goes into the draft with 1 pick on day 2. He leaves with 3. So yeah, that's like definitely vibing with me and how I saw things. I think that's a good question on Cole Bishop. I think that's the fascinating layer. We know at some point, he's been pegged to start for this defense. The fascinating part is when. And I think the way that you look at this is Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp set the floor for your safety tandem. And you should be excited about that. Those are good starting safeties in the NFL. They've been Super Bowl winning safeties as starters, right? That's a good thing. I really like Mike Edwards, probably more than Taylor Rapp, to be honest with you.
Same.
So what you have to do is ask yourself this question. If you're, Joe Dana, Bobby Babbitt, Sean McDermott, how much can Cole Bishop elevate the ceiling of this safety tandem? And whenever you feel like that he can, that's when you play him. And I'm fascinated to find out if they try to go with more of that dime package because they did last year, but that was also out of necessity, right? When Milano got injured, Poyer down to linebacker, and then you bring in Taylor Rapp to play alongside Micah Hyde. Is that something they want to continue with, at least situationally? Because if so, I think you got 3 safeties that could work well together in terms of interchangeability and how they could play. I really like Bishop as a lower safety that plays down near the line of scrimmage, have him serve as the enforcer type or even in split zones. Whereas Mike Edwards, I like him in deeper alignments, and Taylor Rapp is kind of more of a hybrid in between both of them. So I think they're nice complementary skill sets, but it's all about that ceiling. How quickly can he earn the trust of the coaching staff? That's the big thing, right? We know that playing time for this team is tied to their ability to trust you. And for some players, Osiris Torrance, that's right away. And even, warding off other veterans at that position. For other players, Kyer Elam, it takes a little bit of time. So where does he fall on that scale will be fascinating to find out. But when he does gain the trust and they do believe that he elevates the playmaking and the ceiling of that tandem, I think that's when he sees the lineup.
Yeah, I'm very fond of Cole Bishop, Joe. He was my favorite pick for the Bills in this draft. I think, again, the versatility he offers. I think he's better closer to the line of scrimmage, but I think he can still play center field if asked to. But again, I think he's a hard-hitting, plays along the line of scrimmage, very good sacking the quarterback at college. So that's kind of an underrated aspect of his game. But moving forward with Dwayne Carter and Ray Davis, the next 2 picks, Dwayne Carter, defensive tackle from Duke, can probably play at 1 tech or 3 tech. Curious to what your thoughts are there. And then Ray Davis, he is kind of that thunder to the lightning of James Cook, but I think he brings a little bit more pass catching ability than some may think. And I think he's also a bit quicker than most people are talking about. So your thoughts on those 2 picks, and were those 2 guys that you were intrigued by pre-draft and guys you thought the Bills could target, late day 2, early day 3?
We'll start with Dwayne Carter, the 3rd round pick. I think it's really beneficial for this team to get a cost control player that's going to serve as a depth piece of the defensive tackle rotation. They've paid for depth at defensive tackle, and let's be honest, it hasn't worked. Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips, Vernon Butler, these guys haven't been good, but they're paid. So stop doing that. Let's get a young player in here that's going to be on a cost control rookie deal. And what's the worst thing that's going to happen? He's not going to be better than those players, but he's going to cost less. I know it's kind of a crappy way to look at it, but I think that's the floor of the conversation. Now, I like Dwayne Carter, penetration style player. I think he's far more of a 3 tech than a 1 tech. And I think if you're going to play him outside of the 3, you move him out. You move him towards a 4-eye. You play him head up over the tackle situationally. I don't think you want him to rush the C gaps, but you have him as a B gap defender. I like him best in that type of role. Penetration ability, right? That's the name of the game. He can rush. And I know his sack production dipped this past year, but people need to know that he played almost 20% of his snaps as a defensive end, which is not, that's like, you remember Dwayne Edwards one year, he winds up playing defensive end for the Bills. And you're wondering, well, what happened? Well, he's not a C gap rusher. He's a B gap rusher. So I think that's where you want to play Dwayne Carter. I like the idea of him playing alongside Ed Oliver on long and late downs to give you some real juice on the inside. So I think depth in terms of that penetration style player is very helpful for this team. And again, the cost control nature intrigues me a lot. Then Ray Davis is a player that, I watched him on tape going into the draft, and I thought he was kind of just a very ordinary college player. And so for me, when I evaluate running backs and I find them to be ordinary college players. That doesn't move the needle for me in terms of where you're going to find him slotted on my draft board. But I think when you look at the skill set that he does bring to the table, it's valuable to the Bills. 5'9", 213 pounds, dense build, really good through contact, 3.8 yards after contact per rush. That's what they needed, physicality between the tackles to complement what they have in James Cook, who is more of a slasher. He's quick, agile, but he doesn't really win post-contact. He's not that short yardage player, and I think Ray Davis gives him that. But like you mentioned, there is some pass-catching appeal here. Used down the field, 7 receiving touchdowns this past year. And I think that's a piece of this offense that Brandon Beane has been after. He's been trying to find these pass-catching backs, and even when he has them, he's still looking for more, right? That's something we've already seen happen throughout the years, the last few years in particular. So I think they want to have those check-down options for Josh Allen. I think they want to have somebody that can, win between the tackles and maybe take away some of those short yardage carries from Josh Allen. That was one gripe that I would probably have about the Bills' offense last year was that their short yardage rush packages were not consistently effective. Hopefully Ray Davis can really help in that area.
Yeah, they tried to solve those with Latavius Murray, Leonard Fournette. Could never seem to get it going in that regard. Ended up having to turn to Josh Allen late in the year with some quarterback sneaks. But Dwayne Carter and Ray Davis, 2 players that certainly fit the bill in terms of what the Bills were looking for in terms of leadership ability coming out of this draft. You lose so many veterans in the offseason. You replace them with guys like Dwayne Carter, Ray Davis. Dwayne Carter called Mr. Duke at Duke, a 3-year captain. We discussed it last week. So a lot of experience in that regard and something else that they can bring to the table. But moving on to another one of the Bills' draft picks, Cedric Van Pran Granger, a player that could also slot in and help the Bills immediately, perhaps with the kind of the musical chairs on the offensive line. You have Connor McGovern coming in at center, David Edwards at guard. Can Cedric Van Pran Granger play guard, Joe, in your opinion? I think he only had some experience in practice at that position in college, as far as I know. But does he have that versatility? And do you think that he may be able to challenge for a starting spot coming out of training camp?
Well, I think AJ said Cole Bishop was his favorite pick. I think my favorite pick is this one, Cedric Van Pran. So I'm going to gas up a 5th-round pick here, and maybe people are going to say, Joe, pump the brakes. He's a 5th-round pick. Well, I think the reason he fell to the 5th round was really 3 things. A little bit light, 298 pounds, doesn't really have length, right? Sub 32-inch arms. And then he has only played center. So if you're a center only that's lean and lacks length, that's not going to help you score very well as a prospect. But watch him play. I mean, this guy gets it done at Georgia. There was one of my underrated players in this class that I thought was being slept on. I was elated to see the Bills get him in the 5th round. He just doesn't lose a lot of reps, man. He wins with technique. He's got a lot of power, which you might not think for 298 pounds, but he absolutely has it. I think he has a good understanding of angles and how to play in space and how to frame pass rushers, and he did it against the best of the best for 44 games in a row at Georgia. 2-time team captain. You mentioned the added leadership to this team, and not that you expect these guys to come in and be Jordan Poyer or Mitch Morse on day one, but you feel like as they get comfortable, they have a path to doing that, which I think is important in this overall roster reset. I do think that he does offer versatility. I can tell you that I've confirmed that with the team, that they do believe that he can play guard. And so he'll get a chance to do that. But I think this is a good hedge, right? The Bills have transitioned their interior offensive line by choice. They cut Mitch Morse. They traded away Ryan Bates. And so that was kind of a blowing it up in some ways. We have always been programmed to think that, all right, someday Ryan Bates is going to take over for Mitch Morse. Bill said, nah, we're not doing that. We're going to do something else. And so Connor McGovern moving over to center. And that sounds good in theory. The guy's never really played center with any sustained amount of time in the NFL. It's nice to have a hedge against that in Cedric Van Pran, who at minimum challenges David Edwards at left guard, and maybe he's your path to keeping Connor McGovern at left guard. You put Cedric Van Pran at center at some point whenever this is logical and he's ready, and then you can maintain some continuity next to Deion Dawkins. We've heard him say he's never had the same left guard next to him, and now you've already kind of blown that up again for this year. So maybe there's a way to kind of revert all of this and gives you options, which I think is a good thing as you try to figure out your best combination of 5 for this season.
I am absolutely sold, Joe. On Van Pran Granger, I think he would be it'll be an interesting conversation come camp, how much he actually works in with the day one starters or however that may unfold at St. John Fisher University. I have a question talking about your overall grade, but I just actually have a question about Keon Coleman and going back to that conversation really quick. How actually worried are you about the separation? Because there are receivers like Keon Coleman that can win in a phone booth, and that's kind of what he's done. So, like, how actually concerned are you in this Bills offense of him getting separation? I know the numbers aren't great, but there's a lot of talk about Jordan Travis putting him in, not the best of situations. And obviously, he was dealing with an injury kind of down the stretch, so his production dipped. I think he had 12 catches for just over 120 yards in the final 4 games, but against Clemson and LSU, put 5 touchdowns combined and over 200 yards. So how worried are you about that separation in terms of this Bills offense? Or do you think he can just win in that phone booth like he's done throughout his career?
Well, I think part of that's on Joe Brady. He's got to come up with the right opportunities for Keon Coleman to catch the football. But this is where I draw optimism. Keon Coleman has every requisite athletic trait to be a good separator. It's not like he's physically lacking anything. Everything that I'm concerned about with Keon Coleman as a route runner is teachable stuff. And it starts with technique. First of all, how to set up your breaks, how to get in and out of them with suddenness, how to force false steps by corners and then attack that blind spot. It's all teachable stuff. And right now, like, you watch him play at Florida State, he's not asked to run a ton of different routes, a lot of hitches, a lot of goes. And I think developing more nuance within how he executes those routes and then expanding the route tree is what's going to be really important. I think from day one, he's going to be able to win leverage battles in terms of running the glance routes and the RPO stuff. I think he'll be able to get on top of corners and make them play through him when you want to get him vertically. It's how much can we expand from there and how quickly can we do it? I think there's been some good points made out there about how, just recently he's become solely focused on football, right? I think it's amazing. You should play all the sports. I think that helps you. But at a certain point, right, now that it becomes very technical and nuanced and you want to be able to dedicate all your time to it, he just recently stopped playing basketball. So I think all of his time in football, he's young. He sounds like he's really eager, right? I mean, we've all participated in consuming these press conferences. I know, Alex, you've been there and part of these things. This guy feels like he's going to give it everything he's got. You love that he's already reached out to Andre Reed. So it feels like he's doing everything that he can to position himself to grow and develop as a player. And obviously, this is a player that Josh Allen wanted. And now it's on everybody to take ownership in it, have the right plan, make it work, because this could be a really important piece of this football team moving forward.
Yeah, he talked about his usage at FSU. I tweeted out yesterday, there was a tweet going around with like a Corvette in the driveway of a rundown house. And the tweet was, explain this in sports terms. I was like, this is Keon Coleman at FSU. I think if you get him out there, like you said, expand the route tree and give him more opportunities, I think he could really flourish in this offense. But AJ, go ahead. One more question for Joe.
Yeah, so I want to know your draft grade. Maybe you don't have one, but just maybe your general thoughts of the overall draft class. I know we didn't touch on guys like Hardy, who are in the later rounds, and a couple Clayton.
Hardy's one of my favorite picks, man. Ulofoshio, let's get into
it. But are they a Super Bowl contender in your eyes, and just the state of this Bills team moving forward after the draft?
Yeah, I don't want to steal a phrase that I learned from Chris Trapasso, because I thought he put this perfectly. I had him on a guest spot in Locked On Bills a few weeks ago, and he said this is all about writing the next chapter of the Josh Allen era, right? Like, this whole offseason, the reset in some spots, this draft class with 10 picks, what they've done in free agency at this point, it's all about writing the next chapter, right? They had a nucleus. It was a good nucleus. It had unprecedented success in Buffalo. It couldn't get over the hump. You couldn't get past Kansas City and Cincinnati in the playoffs. And so what are you going to do? You want to keep running it back and have the same fate, or you want to try to reset a little bit and while you still have your quarterback in his prime, kind of retool around him to give yourself a chance to go a little bit further. So I see the vision for the team that is absolutely contending and transitioning at the same time. Not a lot of teams get a chance to do that, right? Like, regimes don't last. And I think this regime has built up enough goodwill to earn the opportunity to do that. I see the vision. It's got to come together. Right? I think that's what gives me the most concern. It's not the talent that does or does not exist on the team. It's how quickly can Joe Brady, as I guess really year one as the offensive coordinator, make this work with a lot of new weapons. How quickly can Josh Allen get it going with a lot of new weapons? Defensively, Bobby Babbitt's year one, tons of turnover on the defensive side of the football. The only coach that's returning in the same role year over year is Joe Dana as a safeties coach. So much new, right? How quickly does it come together? And at what point does it hit its stride? And I think that's what it comes down to. I think almost how this schedule is going to lay out is going to be important for the Bills because I don't know that they're going to be playing their best football in week one. And you shouldn't, right? You shouldn't want to play your best football in week one. How quickly Can that happen? We saw a team with a lot of continuity this past year going into 2023. How long did it take? You know what I mean? It took some time. So with even more turnover,
10 weeks or more,
you know, hopefully it doesn't take 10 weeks this time, but there's a whole lot more turnover this go around. So that's, to me, that's the entire X factor. I think they did a solid job in the draft. Like we mentioned at the beginning, addressed a lot of needs. You can see the clear path to how these players are going to roll. It's just a matter of how it comes together. And I guess time will tell.
Yeah, sorry to hold you back on the late round guys, Joe. I know you draft junkies love to get into those 6th, 7th round picks who can come out and give a run at a roster spot. But why don't you just give us some final thoughts here before we move along here, right now, live Buffalo Football Talk. What do you have coming up on the Locked On Bills podcast, Locked On Scouting podcast, and any other ventures that you're doing? We have Bills Digest coming out soon. You'll be a part of that as well.
Outstanding. Yeah. Locked On Bills daily podcast on the Bills. We find plenty to talk about every single day there. Locked On NFL Scouting. Appreciate the chance to kind of shout that out. That is the other daily podcast that I do. So if you enjoy me talking about the Bills, I talk about the rest of the league every single day, and we're getting ready to start our team evaluations where we really grade every player. We start to rank these rosters and set the foundation for the season ahead. So that's coming up there. And of course, looking forward to whatever you have me write for Bills Digest. And I guess the best way to keep track of all of it is on X at the Joe Marino. I try to do my best to share all my content there.
All right, Joe, thanks a lot. Get back to dad duty. The wife's calling. I can hear her, and keep doing a great job over there on Locked On Bills.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, and we are back. Another great guest, Joe Marino of Locked On Bills. AJ, it's really been a great start to the podcast. We had Matt Perino, Tim Graham, and Del Reed last week, and having Greg Tompsett and Joe Marino on this week. Great support from the podcasting community and beyond. It's really been a warm welcome, and we can't thank these guys enough.
Yeah, it's been a great start. Like you said, Alex, I'm very appreciative of Greg and Joe for joining us tonight. Make sure to check this show out and check out our Monday show as well, where me and Alex briefly, or actually not briefly, we really broke down this Bills draft class. So again, a lot of draft content coming at you, but we want to get this thing rolling and get our reps in. So come training camp, we're really wheeling and dealing here and giving Bills fans what they want to hear and what they want to be discussed. So again, thanks everybody for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't already, like my comment says, make sure to like, subscribe, and that's how we, can keep this thing going. So we greatly appreciate everyone listening, and I'm excited for what we will discuss next week.
All right, let's get on out of here. AJ probably has a rec softball game or something to get to. The Rec Sports King over here plays, I think, every sport, Rec Sports. AJ, what do you got? Soccer coming up this weekend?
I have my soccer game tomorrow. So I played soccer in high school, and I'm going.
What are you, midfield? I'm
a striker, but I don't. I know I'm soft, but I don't use my head. I don't really use my head. I'm just a ground player. I have the good footwork, good touch, but I don't really head the ball. And then I play basketball as well. So me and my buddies, it's a pretty in-depth, like 18 team. There's GMs, there's a trade deadline, there's a combine. It's really fun. I mean, it makes you feel like the high school days when you were playing with your buddies. So looking forward to that as well. But yeah, I love yard games, and I love basketball, and I love soccer. So that's kind of where that's the stuff I enjoy to do, especially during the summer.
All right, we'll get to more of that next podcast. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. You can find us on X, YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcast. Please take time to rate, share, like, and review the pod, and we'll see you next time.
Peace out.